Evening all. Thought I'd have a look at the game of Nigel Short against Vishy Anand, which I mentioned in the previous video, where Nigel Short had apparently a very interesting tactic, but unfortunately it was able to be refuted in this game. Okay, but I think the theme of this game is how contrasting two of the queens, actually, one kind of centralized and one kind of decentralized, but the motive was to go for a kind of standard looking kingside attack. So let's have a look at how this happened, this difference in the centralization of both queens in this game, in particular from that very specific perspective as we navigate through this game. So Nigel kicked off with e4 and after c5 he plays actually knight c3, maybe not with the intention of close Sicilian, was evidenced by the game, but something else. I mean, to d6 he played the move f4, but maybe if Vishy had played knight c6, maybe he would have played knight f3, sort of move order trick, and then d4 later. But to d6, okay, there's a kind of this Grand Prix kind of attack system, which can be a good point scorer, but if we look at the mechanics of this, f4 in principle, especially if there's a bishop on c4 later, black's normal reaction is e6 and d5, but because black's already wasted a move playing d6, this would take a bit more time than usual than if the d pawn hadn't been moved already. But knight c6, okay, looking at that d4 square, which is a bit vulnerable, especially with that c pawn blocked, it's difficult to evict a piece from d4 later. Knight f3 and now g6, so trying to get an iron grip on the d4 square. So does white really want to play d4 now? Probably not, because these pawns offer some vulnerabilities, like on the diagonal, so it's probably best not to go for d4 now. But I think in the commentary room, actually, there was a bit of a discussion with the grandmasters there, including Lawrence Trent and Stephen Gordon. So Lawrence Trent and Stephen Gordon had a bit of interesting discussion actually about this position, and they mentioned like bishop b5 might is sometimes a trendy idea, just to encourage bishop d7 and then put the bishop back on c4. Now, this seemingly absurd tempo loss, the idea of it is that it's making e6 and d5 less effectual from black if the queen's not on d5. So if black's losing control of the d5 square, this might not be such a bad tempo loss idea, because it's really trying to loosen black's control of d5. But in this game, Nigel didn't choose bishop b5 and he didn't choose bishop c4. The bishop actually went to e2, which I thought was kind of passive, but it does get the game more out of the books of standard opening theory. Maybe we've seen sometimes in like Dutch defense variations, like in the classical variation, the bishop would kind of retreat maybe to be able to protect c2, and then white could carry on with some sort of attack on the king side later. But it does seem a bit passive, because black's got that iron grip on the d4 square. Now, in terms of this particular theme I'm interested in here, difference in queens, watch out for the difference in queens in terms of the centre, how centred the queens are in this game, and how it makes a striking difference in the power of both positions later. White castles, and now we see knight f6. Now we see a sign that the queen is off for a kind of kingside attack. With this next move, Queen E1. So this does mean decentralization of white's position, but I suppose that's the big concession given by a kind of reverse Dutch defense attack strategy, that really white really is going for the king. If black castles, usually a standard plan like f5, bishop h6, maybe even knight g5, and if the queen's on h4 and the knight on g5, for example, then maybe something like takes and rook f6 will be later dangerous for h7. So that kind of crude kind of attacking scheme might be kind of effective. Or queen h4, trade off the dark squared bishops first, and then do some sort of attack. So these all imply that the queen is getting decentralized. Now, a player of Vishy Anand caliber knows really how to defend these kind of attacks as effectively as possible. So it's kind of instructive, you know, how Black handles this. In fact, let's change the board's perspective here. If we change the board, whoops, not that. View. Flip board. Okay, let's go from Vishy's perspective. So he's faced with a kind of you know, crude looking attack coming up with like Queen H4, maybe D3, maybe F5, Knight G5, maybe that sort of thing. So what does he do first? He plays well, Nigel's move here. So plays D3, doesn't move his queen out to H4 immediately, and Vishy reacts actually with E6. Okay. So we have this idea that Black classically wants to, you know, react in the centre maybe with D5 soon. So what would D5 do? I think it just increases Black's central control. But in terms of this queen centralisation theme, look out for this Black queen as well, making use of this D file. If it can get onto one of these centre squares, it's going to be pretty nifty, being able to sort of use, you know, all directions of the board, for example, if it was on there or here. It's a logical thing about centralisation. You're really making the pieces a lot more powerful. So remember, White's queen is off on this king hunt in contrast. So King H1. Okay, maybe safeguarding, you know, this diagonal, bit of prophylaxis before an attack. But B6, and it looks as though, you know, both bishops are going to be pointing across the centre as well, which kind of looks logical. Bishop D2, Bishop B7, and then the queen. Okay, it's got a particular motive. It wants to attack Vishy's king. So okay, so we've got contrasting queens at the moment. The queen sort of centralised on D8 by default, and now offering actually just an exchange of queens, Knight E8, but it's refused. And look where the queen goes to refuse this queen offer, Queen H3. So in Queen H3, yes, it's attacking that sensitive H7 square, which can, you know, be attacked further, maybe with Knight G5 in the future. But look, you know, Black's got the iron grip on D4, and more worryingly, there's potential for D5. And can this queen be made stronger than that queen? Let's look at it, you know, strategically as well than the concrete of this game. This particular theme is very interesting, I think, because now we see Knight D4. Which takes off, yeah, a couple of knights and gives Black a wedge in the centre, a wedge pawn, because knight takes d4, c takes, so a knight's driven away, you know, from a more central position there as well. So it's really not just about the queens, the contrast in centralisation there, but the other pieces. These pieces are pointing nicely across the centre, standard attacking theme, and these pawns are flexible at the moment. Okay, but maybe, you know, f5 is a threat, a concrete threat against the king. King safety has to be factored in. So Vishy's next move is actually interesting, but also positioning. I guess he wants to also extend the scope of this guy across the diagonal. So this next move is not only defensive for his king, but is also positional, just to play f5. Okay, now Nigel, he reacts actually with the move c4. So that's kind of interesting. The pawn's actually pinned. It can't do f takes because then queen takes e6 would be check as well. Okay, this pawn is offering a kind of clamp on d5. So the key strategic decision here: do we want to take? You know, does Vishy want to take the en passant to clear away this pawn to be able to play d5 later? What would be the motive of playing d5? I think this contrast of queens is an interesting partial motive for Black wanting to play d5, and therefore the decision to do the en passant capture is made easier. Okay, if d5 really is a strategic thing Black wants to do to try and increase the centralisation of his pieces relative to White's, then fine. It looks like a good idea. D takes c3 was played. Okay, and it temporarily extends the scope of this bishop anyway. It's not blocked in by the pawn. Knight takes c3. And now look at this next move, which I think is delicate. It's positional and tactical at the same time. Queen d7. It's keeping the queen on the centre line. So if there is a liberating d5 later, the queen's going to be, maybe taking a very nice central position, but also position, tactically rather. Sorry, f takes e is now on the cards. This pawn's now protected. So dual purpose move, positional and tactical. Rook ae1, and now Vishy decides to connect his rooks with this knight move. So knight c7, but the knight is also supporting d5 as well potentially, and it does some other useful stuff from c7. Okay, bishop f3. So Nigel's trying to keep control of the centre, in particular e4. He's reinforcing e4. Rook ab8. So this is more of a tactical, I think, decision not to have this liability. So if takes, there's no bishop exposure for interpose another move like f takes e6. Okay, fine. Nigel does actually play e takes f5 here, and after this e takes f5, it looks as though black's just about, with that knight actually he's controlling d5, so maybe that's why, another reason for knight c7 to control this d5 square. But remember, this liberating push with the d pawn might mean this queen is going to get a nice central position soon. So bishop takes b7, rook takes b7. But now queen f3. Is white's queen so bad here? It's not really that bad on the diagonal. But black has now a liberating move, this d5. So again, he's going to chase away this knight from the centre. So rook f2, and now rook bb8. So the rook's coming maybe to challenge the e file. So rook f e2, but actually there isn't rook e8 here, because white could actually just take and then take on d5. So instead, Vishy's actually forced to play a defensive move, and it looks as though white's doing okay here. But unfortunately, he is faced with this d4. It's very difficult to do something about d4, which is going to give white again this kind of central superiority, but beyond that, this ability to maybe get a better centralized queen than the white queen. So a3 d4 happens, the knight's driven back, and now we finally see it, this remarkable contrast that I picked up on in this game, this queen d5. So it's behind that central pawn wedge. It makes the whole reactive plan actually of black striving to play d5 and d4. It gives it some maybe greater justification than a lot of us club players would consider. Just from this very simple idea to have a more centralized queen than the opponent. Now here it would be unpleasant if white did take on d5, because black's got a big bind on the position. The knight is controlling that key entry point. Black could just double up rooks maybe and enter via c2, and these pawns are going to be fragile. So Nigel, he plays queen g3, and here we start to see a massive contrast. Look at that queen, fantastically nice, queen centred, protecting a lot of key squares. Can reverse if needed to d6 or d7, which will be useful as we see later. So it's a wonderful queen to have. So from a positional point of view, could we say maybe black's got the better of the positional battle just through this simple idea of a better centralized pieces. But okay, rook ff8, and now Nigel goes for the king, h4. The interesting thing now is that after rook fe8, maybe a lot of us would be scared to play what Vishy played. After h5, Vishy opened up, it seemed, his own king. He didn't give Nigel this continual option of playing hg. Maybe the knight's going to come to f2 at some point as well. Actually, Vishy just was brave. He just took on h5. And he's even allowing an entry point, that e7 rook. He's inviting, white rook into the position. So rook e7. So a couple of rooks came off, and now we see, okay, there's an immediate threat of mate. So that has to be something done about that. The queen is not taking off its central spot here, though. Just knight e6, just offering a7. So I think Vishy's idea, he's going to try and actually use this rook on this file if he can just move his king. So he offers the a7 pawn. So king h8. But just look, the queens, the superiority of the queen is evident here. but will it actually have practical implications? Well, I think actually with this GH, the practical applications are emphasised. You know, Rook G8 striking at G2. There will be some concrete stuff from this more abstract notion that you just have a more centred queen. So knight F2. And actually we've seen them move bishop F6 first now, not Rook G8 or anything. So bishop F6 means, well, G5's covered, H4 is on the cards as well. And in fact, after knight H3, H4 is played. Okay, the queen's driven back, F2. And now, okay, this knight is also slightly superior in terms of centralisation to white's knight. But is this all theoretical? Because if the black king can be got at, it doesn't matter. But how can these pieces get at the black king? Well, the G5 square seems to be an entry point for the knight. So Vishy's next move stops that entry point. So theoretically, we could say, well, apart from this rook, which looks kind of dangerous on the 7th rank, but even that, black's rook free coming to C8 is very, very dangerous in return. This rook's kind of committed on that A7 square at the moment. But here is a remarkable tactic tried by Nigel, based actually on this rook on the 7th and the king's safety factor. It does backfire though, which is unfortunate. But was it really justified by the position? I think Nigel's position actually it was just about okay. If he plays some precise moves. Let's add a bit here, and Engine is giving just a slight advantage to black with white's suggested move, say rook F7, with the idea of maybe just trading rooks and then bishop B4 later, stuff like that. But this next move is highly committal, and it's actually refuted. It's knight G5. The idea is to make the king a bit bare on the H file, so that Queen E2 to H5 is very, very scary, making use of this rook. Okay, now Vishy, he just actually in this position he took with the knight, so that's interesting in its own right as well. What would happen if he just takes with the pawn? Well, actually, let's put back a bit here. Let's just take the knight with the pawn as an example. So pawn takes. In fact, white might be okay according to Rybka. F takes. So here, if the bishop's forced to retreat back, because otherwise bishop takes, knight G5, queen H4 is dangerous. Let's have a look. This would be a bit of a disaster for black. In fact, this position is much better for white, and black doesn't want to get mated. This would actually lead to a forced mate if black's not careful. So this is a very, very interesting tactic, but the first step in its refutation is actually not taking the pawn, because FG does seem as though it does the trick of keeping white's attack. So say bishop G7, actually this might just be equal here, check, and now G6, and the attack can carry on a little bit. And now Queen E7, so making use of that rook. So say Queen E5, check, and it's given actually on Engine checking this, it's given actually as equal with a move like either G4 or bishop F4. Very, very tactical position, but these complications were all avoided very elegantly by Vishy. So knight G5, he uses the more theoretical aspects of his position, which is the more centralised queen really. He just modestly just takes with the knight. Okay, so FG, and he takes the pawn, and now we see the amazing point as well of the knight sack is to follow up with another sacrifice to really get into this, to forcibly try and get into this H5 square. So we see this move bishop takes G5 from Nigel, very creative attacking move, but it doesn't quite do the trick. Bishop takes G5, Queen E2, so a menacing threat of Queen H5. Okay. Now in this position, it is very, very interesting. I think a few defences would actually really badly fail for various technical reasons. Let's have a quick look actually. So say bishop h6, then queen e7 is powerful, threatening mate on h7. So say queen g8, then check, and this check is, look at that centered queen actually, attacking in those directions and attacking the b8 rook, would mean actually an advantage for white in this variation, because look, the queen would be deflected, from the protection of that rook, and this would be better for white. Queen takes b6. So there's that to consider as a defense, but rule it out. So the best defense seems to be actually played by Vishy here, which Rybka really likes, and I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 10 seconds. So this is the major threat to deal with, queen h5. So you can either stop for 10 seconds now, or just stop the video and come back. It would be great if you could find this defensive move. So you're a piece up here, but you don't want your king to be mated. So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, Vishy just played queen d6, and it seems this simple queen retreat, protecting h6 now, inviting the queen to h5, does the job very, very adequately of defending the position, just leaving Vishy a piece up. A check was thrown in. I'm not sure what else there is, because this queen is really covering all the entry points kind of effectively. It's just this h5 looks a bit scary. But now the choice of bishop h6 or queen h6, the idea is actually to put the queen on h6, and this covers the key squares basically. Nigel he put his queen back, but now rook c8 with a terrible threat of counter-attack with rook c1, and this is all disaster now for white. Nigel took on f5, but he's getting actually forcibly mated or losing lots of material. So king h2, there's a check, and actually he got mated now on g3. But yeah, okay, it was an amazing tactical concept, but the theoretical basis for it was seemingly refuted by a very elegant queen retreat, just back one square. But still, ingenious creativity from Nigel for the attack. Let's have a look at that again. But Black's whole reacting to the flank attack had concrete implications for particular pieces. In particular the queens. The difference in centralization, I just thought, was a very interesting aspect of this game for this thematic d5 idea. So we might be thinking of d5 and thinking, so what if we get d5 in? Well, actually, it carries a lot of punch. If you can start to get better centralized pieces than the opponent and a more aggressive kind of pawn structure for the center, because it does leave these pawns a bit passive looking, and this knight actually stumbling a bit. So this d5 idea does seem worth playing for, and trying to keep the queen as centered as possible throughout this kind of flank attack, and it does make available the key defensive resources, as shown by this game anyway. This is an example game that even an ingenious attack can be made possible to refute, even allowing a dangerous looking rook to the 7th rank. So knight e6, holding the position, and the rook's able to come to c8 at some point, kind of dangerously, but king h8, so making way. Maybe the rook and queen could coordinate potentially on g2, but bishop f6, knight h3. Okay, but Nigel's still interested in going for the attack. So first, actually, the idea of knight g5 was ruled out, but kind of rudely kind of exposed maybe as a potential tactical brilliancy move, knight g5. So a sort of double piece sack idea, but the theoretical basis for the attack in terms of control of the centre, more centred queen in particular, which seemed to save the day here for this otherwise ingenious tactic. Because unlike Queen E2, there'll be G4. So by knocking out the G pawn, it's setting that condition that the Queen can really get access to the H5 square. But this ingenious move here, Queen D6, just leaves. It seems the attack runs out of steam, unfortunately for Nigel. And Rook C8, the counter attack is just a menace now. Especially, there's nothing to stop the Rook coming from to C1. So that's probably the end of White's king actually. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.